slides, the evolving views of the next generation towards Singapore Total Fertility Rate TFR. With Singapore TFR at this historical juncture, your voices as the future architects of our society have never been more critical. Before we dive into the data, we wanted to capture the raw, unfiltered perspective of youth across Singapore. We hit the streets to ask for your real talk on TFR, and your responses were eye-opening. Let's see the highlights. Video, please.
Singapore's fertility rate has hit an all-time low.
Let's ask the people walking the streets of Singapore, what do they think about it? Can I get your name?
My name is Ilkin and
June. Hi, I'm Charlene.
I'm Trisha.
I'm Michelle.
My name is Sharifah.
What do you guys do?
currently studying, I'm in RP and
IT. I'm a final year student in SMU studying computer science.
We're currently awaiting university.
If you don't mind me asking, how old are you guys?
I'm 17 and
18.
We're both turning 20 this year.
What do you think TFR stands for?
DFR. I guess something fertilization rate.
teenagers fertility rate.
Total fertility rate.
So it's actually called total fertility rate. Do you know what that means?
Not really.
Singapore's fertility rate just hit an all-time record low. Can you guess the rate that Singapore is in right now?
In every household, there's at least only one baby.
Out of 100 couples only do.
Thing is stopping young people in Singapore from having kids.
The birth rate in Singapore, it is very low, right?
Yeah.
Because of Singapore is getting expensive, I would say, because of the economy.
I think the rising cost of
Yeah.
living in Singapore and then sending them to school, the school fees, and so parents have to go to work also, so they may not have time to take care of the children.
If they're at work, maybe they're not really sure how their child is at home.
Might be stress.
Financial.
Financial.
Yeah, financially.
I think it's because now Singapore, the house is more expensive. They are working every day and then confirm very tired. Then they probably if they cannot tahan at work, they confirm don't want kids also. I feel that's what's stopping both husband and wife is not have kids.
What do you think can be done to actually help or motivate youth nowadays to actually look forward to having kids?
Prepare your financially first. And second one is you also need to communicate with your partner that you both are ready to have child.
I know the government is doing a lot of subsidies. The deeper rationale behind subsidies is about giving people the confidence and the assurity that they are able to raise their child successfully. But if they're able to somehow protect or be able to give assurance for education of future children, it's kind of reshaping education in a way that's really able to help our future children be future ready.
Alright, that's a very good quick video on TFR. So to set the stage for our discussion, we first need to look at the data. Since March, Heartware Network has been conducting an extensive quick sensing poll capturing the views of over 1,000 youth respondents on socio-economic facts and families' aspiration over the Youth Bank. To share these insights with us, please welcome Ms. Shona Lau, Executive Director of Heartware Network, for the presentation of the YouthPulse poll finding. Ms. Shona, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Min Indranee, SPS Goh Hanyan, Board Director, Dr. Ting, Raymond, our board member, and I think members of the media, and most importantly, our young people who are here today. So welcome, and let us start our look at what's been happening behind the scenes. So why did we decide to jump into this national conversation? We felt that because we are in the youth space, this is something that impacts all of us and something that we are in the space to do. So we ran a YouthPulse poll about what youth think, right? And we looked at how today's demographic trends shape our future. So here we go. So the poll was designed around 3 specters: awareness, attitude, and action. And we believed as a quick pulse, it was only 10 questions for most of you who did it, right? In terms of how long the poll ran, it ran for 5 weeks, from March to May. We received over 1,000 responses, so thank you to all of you. 62% were aged between 16 and 20, 24% below 16 years old, and then the remainder were 14% age 21. So we do get a good feel of what our younger segment are feeling. 69% female respondents, But that also reflects our volunteer base. We do have more women in our database. So 93% are actually aware. So awareness is nearly universal for this issue. They are very highly conscious, definitely from our results, not passive observers, and tempered by practical realities. And this awareness actually deepens with age. In fact, males actually have a deeper awareness compared to females when it comes to policies. 39% are open, but not in a rush to marriage and family life. And I really hope so, because I think, as DPM Gunn said, you should be focusing on your studies, especially the younger ones, right? So 17% looking forward to it, and a lot of this are our gentlemen here. Girls are mostly still figuring it out. 1 in 4 males are looking forward to marriage and family life, so that's very optimistic. Whereas for the girls, 1 in 4 are unsure to marriage and family life. And if we look at both genders, it's interesting that the similar sentiment is observed across both at 40%. So to summarize, most youth remain open to marriage and family life, but are not in a rush. How do youth feel? 58% say it's not easy to form meaningful relationships. And surprisingly, this is actually perceived as more difficult as our youth grow older. In fact, 49% of males and 46% of females say it's not very easy. So while many youth remain open to relationships, forming meaningful connections is increasingly seen as a challenge. How do perspectives change? So as youth mature, we noticed an insight that perspectives become more defined. So in the younger group, everyone's still figuring out, not in a rush. But as you get older, there's a very observable polarity. So either you're looking forward to marriage, or it's definitely not part of your future plans, which is what we noticed. And this is also quite interesting. They could choose 3 options out of a selection of about 8. So what matters most when thinking about marriage and family? It's almost reflective of Maslow's hierarchy, right, of needs. So 18%, 19% financial considerations. And this is also mentioned in the street video, right? The girl on the street, first thing she said was financial considerations. 16%, almost 17%, it was about finding a suitable partner. And if we look at personal readiness, that comes to about 15%. And government policies didn't rank so high. This is 4%, which also makes sense because the policies are really not targeted to you, right? So youth place greater emphasis on personal readiness than on external support schemes when considering marriage and family life. How do youth prepare for the future? So again, if we take the range from the 16-year-olds to the over 35s, so meeting new people and building connections, which is perfectly right. It's more common among younger youth, but as you get older, it's more about financial and life planning for the future. So as youth transition into adulthood, priority shifts from building connections to planning for long-term stability, and this is, I think, a normal assumption one would make. So the good news, youth still want to engage. So it's still very positive here. 79%, rated relationships, family life, future life choices, as things that they want to, they look forward to. And this actually increases with age in terms of wanting to participate in conversations or initiatives. So despite uncertainties around building relationships or starting a family, many youth remain open to meaningful conversations and future initiatives on relationships. So we end sort of on a positive note, and perhaps some strategies moving forward could be continually, providing informal, non-pressured spaces, such as volunteering, where you form friends, and that's how it starts, right? And also perhaps from the government angle. I mean, I'm no expert here, but very targeted policies moving forward. So I will end with data, and I'll pass it on to dialogue. So may I please invite Ping Chuan Yet to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Hi, Shona.
It is clear that while challenges are complex, the desire for meaningful future remains strong amongst our peers. So it is now time for the highlight of our morning. I would like to invite Minister Indranee and Senior Parliamentary Secretary Ms. Goh to join me on stage for our dialogue session. Minister, please. Minister, thank you for being with us. The findings we saw highlights a mix of concerns regarding Singapore's demographic future. And to kickstart the session, I will start by asking my question, one question first, and then I will select some questions from the participants that they have shared with us. So one question is, with Singapore TFR being 0.87, what exactly does it mean? Like, how do we compare with other countries?
That's a very good question. 0.87 is not great, lah. Let's put it that way. But the thing is that globally, TFR has been trending downwards. We see that across the world, with almost all countries, only one or two buck the trend. It is more so, I think, for some of the Asian countries. So Korea, Japan, Singapore, our rates are lower. But there's also another trend, which is when you look at it globally, within big countries, right, cities have lower birth rates. Cities have lower TFR. So if you triangulate all this information and ask yourself what is common to those places, countries and cities which have lower TFR, it's really what you have mentioned earlier that we saw. Stress, competition for resources, but also competition for time, because you're having to work and then split time with family, looking after children. It's all the stresses and strains of being in an urban environment. So I think that in Singapore, what we want to do is to be able to give assurance to young people that in Singapore, it is a safe place, it is a good place, and it's a place where you can feel safe to get married, to have children, to have the assurance of knowing and the confidence of knowing that you can go ahead with such plans if you meet the right person and if you would like to have children.
Interesting. All right. Minister pointed out a good point about competition for time and resources. And we have an audience in the house today who would like to share the cost of bringing up children. So is Jia Heng in the house? All right. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you. I'm Jia Heng from RI. And my question is, how can the government encourage citizens to have families beyond providing financial grant and leaves, focusing on the psychological and social barriers rather than just the financial ones? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that question. And do you know, I'm going to turn it on its head, because the question that you asked, right, was, it started with, how is the government? And government can do many things with policy, etc. But remember that slide? And do you want to show that slide, which the pyramid on the policy? Yeah, that's right. Just see. Okay, so if you look at this, right, what matters most when thinking about marriage and family? You can see that the government policies and support schemes is only 3.9% from this survey. And that kind of mirrors what we've been hearing also, that the government policies are important and we will definitely do our part. But it's the other three things combined that make a big difference. One, financial considerations, and since there's a distinction between financial considerations and the top one government policies, I think what young people are feeling is that before I get married and have children, which involves a financial commitment because I have to buy a house, I have to make sure that, I can look after, provide for the family, they want to be sure that they have good jobs, good incomes, and that financially there's an assurance that I can proceed forward with my future. So I think that that's very important, and we have a number of policies which support that. For example, housing. We have public housing that we want to make sure is affordable, accessible. There's BTO flats, and we have recently revised the framework so that you have plus, prime, and standard. And actually, many couples, when they buy, especially if they have CPF and if they have jobs, which means that you get you're steadily building up your CPF, the cash outlay to purchase a house can actually be very low. Either zero to a small amount, cash outlay. It's not to say that because you have the mortgage, you have your loan, but as you earn and your CPF builds up, you use your CPF to pay it over in installments. So the financial considerations part actually involves planning on the part of everyone. Something that seems that it would cost a lot, like a home, is manageable if you have a combination of savings, a combination of CPF, and ensuring that you have a steady stream of income, like a good job. And when you stream it out and do the repayment over 10, 20, 30 years, it's much, much more manageable. So I would say, in direct response to your question, that over and above government policies, which we're working very hard on, doing some thinking about planning for your future and making sure that you have the assurance of income and financial, safety nets is very important. Then the second one, finding a suitable partner. That one, no amount of policy can change this one. This one, it's something that you're going to have to find that right person, because we can't dictate, right? We can't say, you so-and-so, please date so-and-so and end up marrying so-and-so by X date. It doesn't quite work that way. But what I think, government maybe, but actually everybody else, Heartware, and all organizations, what we can do is create opportunities for young people to meet. Yes, that's right. So 58% say it's not easy to form meaningful relationships. And that's a very large number. And obviously, if you can't form meaningful relationship, then you can't progress to the next stage, which is, finding somebody that you actually want to go out seriously with and eventually landing up, right? So I think this is an area that we need to focus on. And when I say I mean not necessarily government, because I really do not want to go down the path of having government-mandated, dating events, etc. And then you all have to turn up, and then we give you points, right? And then we'll grade you on whether you turned up and how you have performed. You really don't want that sort of scenario. But I think what works best is when you have organic activities which you choose to go to because you like the activity in the first place, and you're likely to meet other people there who like the same sort of activity, which means that you have something in common already. So volunteering is a great way to do that, because if you're volunteering is not the same across the board. There'll be some who like to volunteer for social causes. There's some who like to volunteer for green causes. There's some who like to volunteer to work with animals and rescue shelters. But the starting point there is that you already have something in common, because there's something to start with and to talk about. And then the other can you go back to the pyramid? Personal readiness and commitment. So this one is a very amorphous concept, right? But I think it feeds into this whole thing about adulting, which is our schools and our education system prepare you for work. It prepares you for academic content. It prepares you really to be able to navigate the economic world out there. But I'm not sure to what extent everybody feels ready in terms of becoming an adult. What does it mean? And how do you prepare for that? Both in terms of your financial part, thinking about savings, thinking about eventually when your savings grow, investing, that's one thing. But also the emotional part. How do you navigate relationships? And in this day and age, for your generation, I think it's harder because you're on the internet and social media so much. If you think about it, how many of us, after we go back home, have dinner, done our homework, whatever it is, then you go to your device, right? Then you're watching Netflix, or you're interacting with ChatGPT or whatever other chatbot you're dealing with. What it means is that you're talking to your phone. You're not talking to another human being, and you're not interacting with another human being. But when you go out into the real space, human beings don't behave like chatbots. You say things, and sometimes they get angry, and then you have to navigate how to deal with that. Or sometimes somebody gets upset, and you have no idea why. How do you approach them and say, did I say something wrong? How can we fix this? Those are not easy things to do. And the only way to get better at that is just to do it more often. That means meet people, speak, negotiate, sometimes make mistakes, learn how to repair that, learn how to build relationships. All of that takes time, and it means you need to meet people. So this is something which almost everybody else can do. The government can focus on the policy side, but we really need everybody to pitch in and create those opportunities for you to have a safe space without pressure to meet other people and really sort of grow into that whole adulting space. Hanyan can speak more about this because she's in MCCY.
Thanks, Vin. That was very comprehensive. Taken everything out of my mouth. But if I could offer maybe 3 more points to it. The first is about connections, right? Which was, it's okay, you all don't have to flip the slide about meaningful connections. And since joining MCCY, so that was about a year ago, I've been going out there speaking to many of you. And it is hard, I think, finding connections these days because not only there are easier ways, which is online, that's faster, but also because you're stressed for time. There's many things you have to do. You have to go for your internships. You have to show up for things with a very objective-driven mindset because there are certain milestones in life that you want to accomplish. So I do think that, well, marriage and parenthood aside, which is ideally what we want, I do think that helping our younger generation form connections in general is an extremely important thing for us to do because what helps us as human beings is connection, belonging, and purpose, right? That's what makes us different and what keeps us going. And that's truly what our spirit is about. So that's what we're trying to do in MCCY, and together with many other partners, is to create more spaces where youth can come out. I know back in the day when I was a student, we can just sit on a shopping center floor and then no one's going to chase us away and then we hang out there. I shouldn't have said we were sitting on a shopping center floor, but anyway. But these days you can't do that. So we're trying to create more spaces where youth can just hang out, meet people, chill out, and also supporting more interest-based gatherings, because at the end of the day, you don't just go out because there has to be some reason. So enabling more of you to figure out interests that you have and then bring alongside like-minded people to come together, and hopefully that creates more meaningful connections. So that's the connection point. The other 2 points is more, I call it the head and the heart of relationships and going to marriage and whatnot, is that when I also speak to young people and ask them about getting married or whatnot, having children, the first thing that comes back is not financial. A lot of it is, am I going to be a good parent? Am I going to be a good partner? It's very values-driven. It's quite philosophical. So I think, well, the head part of it is that how can we as the government and other partners provide more information to you so that you yourself have the agency to make those decisions? So it could be, how does fertility trend over time? And in fact, when we kind of project our life, right? When I was a student, I project, okay, by this year, I want to get married. By this year, I want to have children. I don't know how many of you are like that. But the reality is that when you think you're going to have children, it doesn't mean it just happens. It doesn't just happen when you want it to happen. And helping people understand, okay, what goes on, what's the biology behind it, what information you need, what help can you get, I think will provide more confidence for young people to take the first step when you're thinking of family formation. And also information around how much does it cost to have a kid. There are many different numbers out there. And the truth is, it depends on what you want for your child, or what you want together with your spouse for your family. And knowing, like what Min was talking about, public housing, how much is it actually? What's the cash outlay? If you're thinking of an MOE kindergarten, what is that? If you want an Eton schoolhouse, of course, it's another figure. So it really depends. So that's more the head. And of course, the heart of it is a bit understanding more what parenthood is about. I think with social media, it tends to exaggerate the extremes. It either makes it look like a hellhole, or it makes it look like rainbows and unicorns. Every day I come home, I hug my kid and everything's great. It's not either, right? Things are messy because relationships are messy, but that doesn't mean we don't invest in them. So I think helping people understand and having honest, supportive, non-judgmental conversations about how different people have raised their children, with helpers, no helpers, single parent, not single parent, one child, many children. I think everyone has a different story. And knowing all these perspectives, I hope, will then give our young people the confidence to say that, yeah, I kind of have a good sense now, and this is what I want to choose for myself and my spouse, or myself if I choose not to get married.
All right, there's a very good, we talk about connections, the head, the heart, and there's one member in the audience who like to talk about how, other than the responsibility of raising children, is housing and all, how support the young parents in the sandwich position. So I would like Eunice. Right, all right, could you please introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Eunice. I'm from Temasek Junior College. And my question is, we need to recognize the immense physical, emotional, and financial pressures of balancing the responsibilities of raising children while also caring for aging parents. So in your view, how can we as a society better support young parents in this sandwich position?
Thank you. Do you want to take another question at the same time? Then we can answer sort of together.
Okay, and also there's one talking about how government can do to support women. I would like Punith to ask the question.
Respected Minister and Secretary, it's my pleasure to meet you and to be a part of this event. My sincere thanks to the organizing team for this opportunity. So my name is Puneet Kumar, and my question here is regarding the couples who like to have the children but are unable to do so due to some health-related challenges that they're facing. So given that the fertility treatments can be financially demanding, so could you please share some government plans to, bring up some initiatives considering the further to subsidize or reduce the cost of the treatment and result in high success rates? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just do a couple of quick answers and invite Hanyan to follow up on that. So first thing is, I think the starting mindset must be that, families are something that are a joyful thing to have. Because otherwise you wouldn't even be having a family, right? And it is, I'm sure, a nice thing to be able to have a life partner and to have children. And at the same time, we love our parents very much. So when that's your starting point, in other words, these are your anchors, your own family and your parents, the approach, from how I approach it is, how can I make sure that I can provide for both and do my best for both? So the starting point, I think, would be for couples as they start off on their journey to work out in terms of finances and to work out also in terms of time what they can manage. Then the next thing would be having a good working relationship with your employers, because if you need to care for your young child or an elderly parent, because sometimes you have a young child and then they get sick, so you need to be at home, you need to take them to doctor, and sometimes you may have an aged parent and they also need to go for doctor's appointment, right? And you need time off. And sometimes you don't need a whole day. You may need a half day, or you may actually bring them, and then whilst they're having the appointment, you sit down on your computer and you can work on your computer. So having understanding bosses who have good flexible work arrangements and who also have good HR policies matters. But sometimes bosses may not realize that their policies are not the most ideal. So I think that there are two things that need to be done here. One, employers and their HR managers need to seriously look at their company policies to see whether it's supportive of their employees who have caregiving and family arrangements. But it's also important for the employee to go and speak to your bosses or HR to say, this is happening and I think it would be good if we could have this type of HR policy. It's a two-way conversation. So that's part two. Part three is where the government also comes in with financial support. And this can take many forms because you talk specifically about the sandwich generation, right? So being caught between having to look after older family members and younger ones. And so one would be providing time. We recently we introduced shared parental leave, 10 weeks, to look after a young child. And at the same time, we're also looking at the issue of caregiving leave or time off to look after your children when they fall ill. That's a piece of feedback that has been coming to us quite often. And then also seeing, if you want to be sustainable over the long run, it's really flexible work arrangements, because you can't legislate in advance and predict how many days in a year you're going to need for both children and parents. But if you have understanding employers who give you that flexibility, then it's much easier to manage. So that's why we say for this work group that it's a whole of society. We need everyone to pitch in to make sure that families are well supported. I'll come back to fertility afterwards, but maybe I'll hand over to Hanyan first.
Yeah, thanks, Min. So again, thank you for the question as well. It's a very big question you're asking, and it truly is, because it hits our aging society issue as well. So you talk about demographic, there's fewer babies, but there's also an aging population. And whether or not a person has a young child or not, the caregivers of these seniors, over time, there are stresses, it's challenging, it's very difficult. So that's where there's a lot of, over the years, a lot of thought and effort has gone into how can we help our seniors age more independently. We always say, right, independently and with dignity. Because after all, I think it helps if they are able to be on their own, not lonely, but be on their own, so that they don't feel like a burden as well to their loved ones. And what this means is that you all have heard of the Healthier SG movement, right? Aging well and everything. It is with that purpose, so that they can live longer, healthier, and bring more services to the home, so that we don't tax our hospitals as well. So all of these is meant to then help the seniors be more ready to grow older, so that it then allows the caregivers to have more space for themselves. And there's of course, there's the caregiving support grant, and also different types of respite facilities, so that the seniors can go there and then the caregivers can have a break. And then, of course, there's a whole other slew of support measures by helping the children then, so that if you think of it, both parts of the sandwich, there's support, and hopefully that relieves the middle layer. But it goes back to Min's point about, at the end of the day, we can help with a lot of financial items, but time is the one that it's really, really difficult to give back. And that's where the flexible work arrangements come in. And I'm hoping that as the nature of work evolves with technology and evolves with the way that workers want it as well, because I think employers also have to respond, that's where we may see that the conversation between the employer and the employee becomes, what do you need? It's not just, I'm going to give you X days of leave, but what do you need? What do I need? And how can we figure out how to work around it? Because actually, if somebody saves 30 minutes traveling to work, could that person be more productive 30 minutes at home? I mean, we don't necessarily always have to think that someone is skiving, right? So I think there has to be that level of understanding and discussion when it comes to flexible work arrangements. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing on aging. So the key, right, for aging is to try to make sure that we age well. Because for young couples who have to look after aging parents or even grandparents, a few things matter apart from the financial part, which is one thing. The other is proximity, which is why HDB introduced the family care scheme. So those who are applying for flats under BTO scheme, we give priority to those who want to live closer to parents or parents who want to live closer to children. That is one way in which you can have a policy that actually helps with this, but it's not as obvious as some of the other policies. But it makes a big difference whether you're living within 1 kilometer or in the same precinct next to your parent, and if you happen to be living in the east and then your parents living in the west. Big difference in terms of how fast you can get across when some family emergency occurs or whatever. So proximity is one thing we're working on. The other is aging well. So you've heard about Healthier SG and Age Well SG. We would like our seniors, as they age, to have good quality of life. Because you can, as you age, you can either have very poor quality, not being able to walk, not being able to eat properly, not being able to do the daily tasks, or you can be, like my former constituency, there was a resident who was, at age 70, he was still playing basketball and running and jogging, and he basically was fitter than a lot of people younger than him. And if we can make sure that your parents, as they get older, stay healthy, that also makes a big difference. So MOH has rolled out the active aging centers. The aim is to have active aging centers in all precincts so that parents can, seniors can go down, have activities, and basically keep occupied socially, mentally. Then we've got, Active SG, which is really to encourage healthier lifestyles, especially for those as they age. And then we've got Age Well SG. Age Well SG is an infrastructure plan where in every precinct you have things that make it easier for those who get older. So whilst this may not directly may not be directly what you had in mind, it is actually quite important. Because if your parents stay healthy, able to age well, have social networks, you worry less. And it frees up your mental, emotional space and allows you to be able to focus more on your younger children as they grow. So you have to see it in the whole. And on fertility, you're quite right. So the work group is actually looking at fertility. But one of the key things we think very important is raising awareness. Because when you're young, at your age, you don't, most people your age don't even have to think about, you don't think about fertility. It's just an assumption that everything will be fine. But we've had couples who, after they've married and tried to have kids, and after several years, then they realized something not quite right, and then they went for the check and found that there was a fertility issue. But because it wasn't on their radar, they lost several years. And with fertility, there's a direct correlation with age. As you get older, the quality of the egg, the sperm gets affected, and the risks are higher. So I think one key thing that we want to do is raise awareness so that at a younger age, you can just have because under Healthier SG, everybody's supposed to sign up, right? And see your family doctor. So I would say from age 21 onwards, good to have a conversation with the doctor, just do some, ask some simple questions about fertility, whether or not there's anything you need to have checked. And particularly if you're married and trying for children, always good to have a chat with the doctor so that early on it's on your radar and you're conscious about it.
Right. Thank you for covering both about the sandwich and also the fertility. And I have a question regarding the workplace policy and culture. So to what extent does Singapore competitive culture and the definition of success contribute to low fertility rates? And this question also linked to one of the questions. Would you like to take two questions at once or just... Okay, could I have Xuan Rong? All right, yes.
Hi, so I'm Xuan Rong, I'm from SMU, and my question is more about the personal trade-offs that we would have to make as Singaporeans. So I come from the perspective that the declining TFR is a necessary trade-off for Singapore's economic development, right? So for example, if I'm a young person, if I were to consider having kids, I might take a pause on my career. Yeah, so that will be a possible trade-off that we might have to make as young people. And looking at across different countries, it's very hard and it's very rare to see a small city-state that is also wealthy but also has a high total fertility rate. I think it's just a very rare combination. So first, it's not really a Singapore problem, but maybe just a city-state problem, right? So if we were to focus on increasing the TFR, what might we stand to lose in other aspects of our development? Yeah, thank you.
So maybe I'll address the career versus having a child trade-off. I would say that the career trade-off might be one of the reasons. Some that I've spoken to have also said they worry about personal independence. So I want to YOLO and I want to travel the world. I worry that it affects the time that I have for myself, it affects my relationship with my spouse. So I think there are many reasons, and of course career is one of it. That is why when Min was talking about it being not a government-only conversation, Because the employers have to also recognize this, because ultimately, in the end, fertility does affect their future workforce, right? And it also affects them being viewed as a progressive workplace and employability. And so when we think about, does it mean when a lady gets pregnant and she leaves her workplace for a while and comes back, will she get, they call it, we get penalized for that, right? And I do think to a certain extent, some parts of it can be mitigated if there are early conversations and if the employer is open enough. The good thing is that you know exactly when the baby is going to come out. And barring any, sometimes they come out early, but barring that, you roughly know there's an EDD, you roughly know someone's going to be out for how long, when the person's going to return. And in fact, I was very lucky. I have 3 children, so I'm very lucky that during my break, my employers are very open to have that conversation, even during my maternity, to say that, are you doing okay? Do you need to have a 50% when you come back, meaning part-time? Or do you want a longer leave, shorter leave? And having that constant dialogue, I felt was very useful. And for them, because they knew exactly when I was going off and coming back, the work distribution could be thought ahead of time. So I do think to a certain extent, employers can help to narrow the gap. Now, does it mean that you completely are exactly the same? Realistically, probably not, right? Because the fact is that you'll be gone for about 4 to 6 months out of a year, compared to someone who has been on the job for the entire year. There has to be some level of, for that point in time, there may be a little bit of a reduction in terms of your appraisal, for instance. But I'll go back to say that then, when we choose to become parents, we look at it as a journey, and the career is also a journey. If I'm behind my peers by a year for progression, because I had to raise a child, I think we will have to make that computation in our minds then, is it worth it or is it not? So I think for everybody, the answer is maybe yes or no. I'm not saying that it has to be a yes or it has to be a no, but everybody has to think of it as life is an arc. This is what I'm doing for this time. And between the spouses, you have to decide who then is going to be making that trade-off. And it could be later on. Some husbands choose to step back also for a time because the lady did it earlier, and now the husband, and then over time, both of them come back together to the workforce at 100%. So I do think that the spousal conversation has to be there, the employer conversation has to be there, so that the lady themselves is not by herself, alone, absorbing all the costs and all the penalty of having a child, because that shouldn't be the way to go. And I think that's where the whole of society effort has to come in.
So let me address the question on competition. Do you want to just read out the question again so everybody has it in their minds?
All right. So to what extent does Singapore competitive culture and definition of success contribute to low fertility rates?
Well, from the government side, we've actually been saying that definition of success is something we need to broaden. And yes, in our society, it's true, it is competitive, but we're not alone in that. There are other places which are competitive as well. So I think that the way we need to approach it is this. Why does competition stress us out so much? Why? If you think about it, it's because we're worried that there's only one prize, and everybody wants that one prize. And so you actually compete with the others, and you stress yourself because if I don't do this, I won't get that one prize or that limited prize. And what we've been trying very hard to do over the last few years is not to just have one prize. It's actually to have many prizes and different prizes, because different people have different potential, different capabilities, different aptitudes, and what makes one person fulfilled and happy may not make another person fulfilled and happy. So the key thing to remember here is that it's not just one prize. We want to make sure that there are many prizes. And in the same way for education, it's not only one pathway. So it's not just that you have to definitely be in this school and you have to take this course and go to this poly or this university or take this particular, diploma or whatever it is in order to succeed. In the last 10, 15 years, we've been creating more and more different pathways so that irrespective of which pathway you choose, whether you go ITE, whether you go poly, whether you go university, ultimately there is a way to get to where you want to be. So if we take that step back and see it in that perspective, then the competition need not worry us so much, because we know that no matter which route you take, there is a way to get to where you want to be. Then the next thing is just making sure that you're able to get a good job. And even then, your first job may or not necessarily be your dream job. But so long as you get a chance to get working experience, you can build on that and go on to the next job, which may be better, more suited to you. I mean, we've seen many instances where people apply for a job and then find that this is not really for me and I want something else. So the key thing here in Singapore is to make sure that we continue to create economic opportunities for all of you so that you have choices and so that you can have good careers where you start, and more importantly than where you start, good progression. And that's the whole thinking behind Skills Future. That's the whole thinking behind lifelong learning. That's the whole thinking about why now we are putting so much emphasis on AI, because we don't want you to lose out even as the world changes because of the disruption that AI will bring. And if we see in that context, then I think that hopefully it will be better. Now, the other thing about competition and stress is some things we can address through policy, whether it's making changes in education system, ensuring that you all have good job opportunities. But there's also a big part that as individuals you can do. Because if you think about it, why do we have stress? We have stress when we think we're losing control. When I have to do this because I've got this pressure, I have to do this because if I don't, I will lose out. And that all ties up with that sense that you feel that you're being pushed to do something and you're losing that sense of control. So I think that one very important thing, especially for young people, and this is something you must learn to do throughout your life, is when you get that kind of feeling, take a step back. Don't let the tide overwhelm you. Take a time out and say, I need to take back control of my life, of my time, of my schedule, of my activities. Whenever you feel pressured, take a time out, give yourself some headspace, go for a walk. It will not necessarily be something that you can deal with in a day. Sometimes you have to think about it for a few days or even weeks or sometimes months. But the key thing is take that time out. Think it through, get back into control, that feeling of control over your own life. Then I think that you will find that dealing with competition and stress becomes a lot better. And you must find time to de-stress. You must find time to have play. And you find that it is in those quiet moments, or those moments when you're actually not thinking about anything particular, that sometimes you're the most creative, because you've given your head space to wander and to just relax and think about other things, and unexpectedly, something pops into your head. So give yourself headspace, would be my best advice.
Thank you, Minister Indranee. I like that we have to take a headspace and also take a step back, de-stress, and we talk about competition and career. So there's one question about our future, and you mentioned about Skills Future, and Song Ting have a question about our future generation. So is Song Ting in the house?
So a very good morning to you, Mr. Indranee. I am Song Ting from Singapore Polytechnic. Thank you for taking the time today to speak with us. So I know that the government is actively looking at demographic challenges, but with our TFR at a historic low of 0.87, our future tax base will inevitably going to shrink exactly when our healthcare and social spending for an aging population will rise. So my question is, from a macroeconomic perspective, how is the government planning to structurally finance this shift, ensuring that the heavy burden of both caregiving and higher taxes doesn't fall onto the current generation of youth? Thank you.
How much time do we have for this question? Okay.
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll try and do it in 5. That is a really, really good question. And we actually already started thinking about that. And that is why we raised GST. So you remember that conversation started back in 2018. And why did we raise GST? Because we were looking ahead at that time to see what our population would be like in 2030. And we realized that by 2030, it's going to be 1 in 4, meaning 25% of our population is going to be age 65 and above. Currently, it's 1 in 3. And the point that you made about how with aging population, medical costs will go up is exactly right. And we wanted to find a way to structurally address that in a sustainable way. And that is why we said that we would implement GST, because GST is a recurrent revenue. For every item you buy, for all this, every services provided, there's GST collected, and that's recurrent. And healthcare, as you get older, there's more and more of it, that's recurrent as well. So because you would have recurrent spending, we wanted to make sure we would have recurrent revenue. And that's the reason why we increased GST. But at the same time, we recognize that GST by itself can have an adverse impact on lower income and those who earn less. So when we introduced GST, we also introduced the GST offset or the assurance package. So we gave offsets and financial assistance to the lower income. Lower income got something like 10 years worth of GST offsets, middle income about 5 years worth, to help steady their finances and make sure that affordability was still okay for them. And we also introduced the GST in 2 steps. So with GST, we estimated, because the increase in healthcare would have been about 0.8% of GDP, with the increase in GST, we estimated we would get about 0.7%. So it basically covers that. But at the same time, and this is something all of you may not be so familiar with, we supplement our revenue with income from our reserves. So if you think of it as a pie chart, right? We've got many different types of revenue. We've got personal income taxes, we've got corporate taxes, you have GST, and we have all the other things like the fines and so on. But not many people realize that about 20% of our annual budget actually comes from the projected income on our reserves. So you know that we have reserves, right? And our reserves, the financial reserves, are given to GIC to invest on behalf of the government. And Temasek also is considered part of the reserves framework. So when they invest, GIC in particular, they invest long term. And we have a formula where we have projected income, estimates of income. We don't do actual, because if you do actual, it means it fluctuates up and down and it's very turbulent. But we have a projected income and we take 50% of that. And it goes into the national budget every year. And the other 50% goes back into the reserves, gets reinvested, generates income again, and that income that's generated, again, 50% is put in for the next year and 50% reinvested. So that's how we do it in a sustainable way. And that's why our national reserves are so important, because our national reserves is not something that we just take and put aside and save. Our national reserves, the financial reserves, are something we take, we invest, we grow, and part of that growth is channeled back in. So that's another way of making sure that it is sustainable. Hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you, Minister Indranee. And I like that we talk about National Reserve and also about the future. So we have time for two more questions. This is regarding the role of youth. So we mentioned about connections and all. So is Zafir in the house? All right. Could you please stand up and introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thank you, Minister Indranee and Ms. Goh. I'm Zafir from Singapore Polytechnic, and my question is, given the ramifications of the declining total fertility rate, what roles can youth play today in addressing the issue? And how do you foresee young people needing to adapt to the resultant demographic changes ahead?
So how can youths help, right? So maybe I'll say in two parts. The first is that earlier on so first, thank you for the question. I like it that you're asking what can we do, right? Which is exactly the kind of questions we need. So the first one is about what I talked about earlier on in terms of mobilizing or ground up forming connections, because especially in this day or age, I don't think it goes down well when the government tells you to do something and then you'll do it. I don't think it happens that way anymore. It has to come from you, right? Then you get bought in, then you'll do it, and then you'll come. So use being to step forward and start organizing things for yourselves, start organizing your interest-based groups, going out there to volunteer. And in fact, volunteering, it's good. Definitely social cause is something that I think everyone should at least try once in your life. But also a bit of a tangent. With AI and all these disruptions, many young people also ask me, so what should I do? What should I study now? Because I don't know what kind of jobs will be there for me in the future. And the reality is that through volunteering, and through all these ground-up movements that you can spur by yourself, you acquire a lot of life skills. You learn how to empathize, you learn how to connect, you learn how to persuade. So all these things AI can't replace. So I do think that on the ground, getting a group going, forming your communities, helping others make connections, that is something that would help both in terms of life and also it helps in terms of building relationships. And I'll say that the second thing then is also about young people as individuals to invest in your own personal relationships. In fact, through the many months, it has been many months, we have been consulting youths because in later part of this year, we'll be launching this thing called the Singapore Youth Plan, SGU Plan. And many pieces of feedback that came back is you still want to invest a lot in family relationships. They want to form friendships, they want to have good ties with their families. And I think there is a very pent-up need to talk about how do you handle relationships? How should I talk to my parent? How should I talk to my partner? So having a safe space, investing in your own relationships, having those exchanges with your peers, I do think would help to collectively build some confidence so that you don't feel like you're alone on this journey. Many times it can feel very lonely because it feels as if everyone has got it sorted out. The truth is no one has it got it figured out. Everyone probably has some difficulty that I can relate to you, you can relate to me. So having that openness will go a long way. So if it's a call to action for our young people to step forward, organize some ground-up activities for your fellow peers to come together and invest in your own personal relationships, because getting the certain goals and career goals in life is one thing, but I think relationships is what really outlasts even your career, is what you reflect on at the end of your life. So it's something to worth thinking about.
That's true, because some of my best friends, two of my best friends were actually my kindergarten friends. And the others were my primary school friends. And then I picked up secondary school friends along the way. It's true, right? Yeah. So.
Yes. I really like that we volunteer, we build relationships and all. And there's an IG post going around talking about the first date, the initiative where there's SingPass verification and then you get a free meal. Yes? Yeah. So I got one last question. So should Singapore treat dating and relationship building as a national capabilities and invest in like a structured ecosystem?
It doesn't look like a majority. I think they prefer organic relationships. Okay, well, before you close, can I just share something? Okay, so with this audience in particular, because you're on the cusp of becoming an adult. If those who are 21, you're already considered legally adult, right? But being an adult can seem quite challenging sometimes because it's like a big thing. You have to get your first job, and then you're thinking about how will I be able to can I afford a home? What about family and so on? So just wanted to share, just based on some experience in life, is that whenever a problem looks big or insurmountable, or, there's this big obstacle, the best way to approach it is always to break it down and to figure out what exactly the different parts are, and then work out what you can do, and importantly also work out what you cannot do. Because the things that you really, really cannot do, don't keep banging your head against the wall and then stressing yourself out about that. And one of the items I wanted to talk about is your first home. Because for somebody who's just starting out, first job, and getting a home, it seems it's a big ticket item. And when you look at that, you wonder, oh, how will I be able to afford that? And the answer is that it is affordable, provided you take certain steps and plan ahead. For Singapore public housing, usually BTOs are heavily subsidized, and the idea is to make sure that there's affordable housing for Singaporeans. How will you be able to finance that? One key thing is when you first start work, always have some savings. So don't spend all of your pay packet. I would say first thing you do is give something to your parents. It's a very old-fashioned concept, but no matter how much it is, I think it's a nice thing to do, even if it's just a small amount, because it just shows that appreciation. That's one. Two, set aside an amount that you save for yourself. Then, of course, you should work backwards. You need to figure out how much you need to spend, etc. But always try to put a little bit in to save. And importantly, have another little bit just to treat yourself. Because if everything was like, I have to save it all, and it's like, then I don't get any enjoyment out of it. So have that little bit where you have that little bit of a treat. But the key point here I wanted to talk about was the savings portion. Because $100 every month easily becomes $1,200 at the end of the year. $200, and you multiply that and so on and so forth. So what might seem like a small amount actually builds up over time. And if you're buying a flat, you do need a cash component. So the early savings that you have can go towards that cash component. Then the next thing you must remember when you're buying a house is, at least if you're buying public housing, and subsidized public housing, is government provides grants. So apart from your cash portion, which you've been busy saving up, there'll be government grants, and you need to see what you're eligible for, and that will help defray part of the cost. That will leave a big chunk that has to be paid, and that's usually taken in the form of a loan. And of course, the way the loans work is that the money is given to you, but you pay it off in installments. And that is where CPF comes in. And that's why CPF is so important. Because with CPF, when you have your monthly salary, a portion of your salary goes into your account, but by law, your employer has to also contribute something. So that doesn't come out of, that the employer's portion doesn't come out of your pay packet. It comes from the employer, which the government has mandated by law. And that forms another savings pot for you. And it goes into your CPF account, and over time it builds, because every month you're contributing, your employer is contributing, and occasionally the government also adds up. And with that, you will, once the amount builds up, you'll be able to draw down on that and pay your monthly installments for the loan. So when you add all of these things together, it actually is affordable and accessible. But it begins with savings. And it begins with that process of how do I plan for the future. So adulting is really about thinking about the future and planning ahead for it. And you may not have all the answers because when you set out, it's new. So the key to finding the answers is ask people. Have conversations with older people, people who have experience or who have the knowledge that is relevant to whatever issue that you need to grapple with. So plan, ask, and your savings, over time, when they build up enough, then you can think a little bit about how to invest it so that you grow your savings. And that, if you do that, you're doing at a personal level exactly what we're doing on a national level when we take our national reserves and we ask GIC to go and invest it, and then we take a portion of that income and we flow it back in. So think about how you can make your finances sustainable, and it always starts with the little things. And just remember to set aside a little treat for yourself. Okay.
All right, thank you, Minister Indranee. So, yes, a round of applause for Minister Indranee, SPS Ms. Goh. And most importantly, a round of applause to you guys, audiences, the youth. All right, just a quick summary. So we have discussed the need for changes beyond government policies, especially in the workplace culture, and the importance of open communication between partners and building a meaningful relationship from a young age, like right now. So we also gain a better understanding of how the government is already supporting youth by preparing for future demographic changes, adjusting tax systems to reduce pressure on the future workforce in Singapore, and most importantly, we heard about the role of youth play in shaping our own future and the steps that we can start taking today towards proper family planning via CPF is very affordable and accessible, and even through simple actions like volunteering and building meaningful connections. All right, to show our appreciation, I would like to invite Dr. Ting Sheng Kiong, Chairman of Heartware Network, to present a token appreciation to the Minister and SPFs. Dr. All right, please remain on stage. I'll now invite our welcome party, Mr. Raymond Huang, Ms. Shona Lau, and Ms. Pauline Tan to join the Minister Office and Dr. Ting for a group photo. And finally, can I get everyone in the audience to stand up and let's capture this moment together. Fun shot, everybody. 0.5. All right, thank you, everyone. What an incredible shot. All right, what an incredible shot. Let's give one more huge round of applause for the Minister and SPS for spending their morning with us. All right, we'd like to thank Scape for sponsoring this wonderful venue and making today's dialogue session possible.
Singapore is looking into caregiving leave for parents whose kids are ill. Minister in the Prime Minister's office, Indranee Rajah, says the issue of time off to look after sick children pops up often in feedback from stakeholders. Ms. Indranee is also the chair for the new Marriage and Parenthood Reset Workgroup. Currently, working parents get up to 6 days of paid childcare leave per year if their youngest child is below 7 years old.
We recently we introduced shared parental leave, 10 weeks, to look after a young child. And at the same time, we're also looking at the issue of caregiving leave or time off to look after your children when they fall ill. That's a piece of feedback that has been coming to us quite often. But if you want to be sustainable over the long run, it's really flexible work arrangements, because you can't legislate in advance and predict how many days in a year you're going to need for both children and parents. But if you have understanding employers who give you that flexibility, then it's much easier to manage.
Ms. Indranee was speaking in a dialogue session to discuss raising families while juggling careers. Companies were also urged to play their part.
The employers have to also recognize this, because ultimately, in the end, fertility does affect their future workforce, right? And it also affects them being viewed as a progressive workplace and employability. And so when we think about, does it mean when a lady gets pregnant and she leaves her workplace for a while and comes back, will she get, they call it, we get penalized for that, right? And I do think to a certain extent, some parts of it can be mitigated if there are early conversations and if the employer is open enough.
At the dialogue, panelists were asked what they can do to address the record low fertility rate. Ms. Goh says building more meaningful connections, such as organizing more interest-based groups and volunteer networks, is one way. But some youths worry that they cannot cope.
I think when we think about adulthood, I will always think about whether I'm capable enough to handle it. Will I be able to start a family? Will I be able to make sure that this family runs well? And even in my own career progressions, am I able to handle work together with family? So I think that building up my capabilities, getting new skills, life skills, in fact, is very important to me, because that will ground me and it will make me be able to manage the different workload and expectations I will face by society.
Most youths in Singapore are holding back from marriage and starting a family because of concerns over finances and a lack of meaningful connections. These are some of the findings from a survey of more than 1,000 youths. Most of them are aware of the country's record low fertility rate. They believe more can be done to address the issue. A majority of youths surveyed were found to be open to marriage or starting a family, but are not in a rush to do so. About a quarter are still figuring it out. A major challenge for youths is forming meaningful connections, with more than half finding it difficult. This could be due to a lack of opportunities for youths to meet and build close connections. Other concerns centre around money matters like the cost of living and housing. There's also finding a suitable partner, as well as work or study commitments.
The financial considerations part actually involves planning on the part of everyone. Over and above government policies, which we're working very hard on, doing some thinking about planning for your future and making sure that you have the assurance of income and financial safety nets is very important.
Still, most youths are open to joining programs related to relationships and family, but some say it depends on the timing or format of such activities. When it comes to preparing for the future, careers and relationships are top considerations for youths, with meeting new people and building connections second.
Helping our younger generation form connections in general is an extremely important thing for us to do. Because what helps us as human beings is connection, belonging, and purpose, right? That's what makes us different and what keeps us going. And that's truly what our spirit is about. So that's what we're trying to do in FCCY.